Well, hello everyone. We're somewhat in the dark. We're trying to figure the lights out. They went out on us. Now we just got to find the right button to get them back on. So it may be a dark evening without a lot of lights. Yeah, I think somebody said down below, what are we at, the Nutcracker? Anyway, welcome. I'm your county supervisor, Carrie Brown. We're holding this community meeting. It's a series of community meetings, and tonight's theme is insurance. We want to help you answer all your questions had to do with insurance. We will have a great list of individuals here with a lot of knowledge to talk to you, answer your questions, and hopefully be able to meet with you individually if you have more questions of any of our speakers. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our CEO for the County of Mendocino, Carmel Angelo, and I want you to know she has gone 24/7. I don't think she's had more than 4 or 5 hours sleep since our disaster, and that goes for all the staff too that's been working on this. So Miss Angela, here you go.
Good evening, everyone. We're glad you're here with us today. What we wanted to do, we wanted to respond to one of the needs that we see, which is really, we wanted to, can you hear me better now? Either there's no lights, there's no sound, I don't know. But anyway, what we wanted to do is respond to a lot of the questions and concerns that have been verbalized to us around insurance. And obviously, we can't answer those questions, so we thought that we would go ahead and bring some experts here. And so before I turn this over to Tammy Moss Chandler, who's our recovery director, you know, it's interesting. This is 30 days since the fire, and I think that we know that there is still there's still a lot of pain out there. We see it, we feel it with you, and what we're really trying to do is everything we can to help you. And I think that, you know, Supervisor Brown said that, and you're hearing that if you're listening to the Tuesday board meetings. We're trying to brief the board every Tuesday and also brief the public on what's happening. We know, you know, I don't have to rehash the fire with you. You all know what happened. But I can tell you from the period of the fire until now that we have been really working on trying to clean up and trying to avert another public health event. What we've done over the last 8 days has really been to work on debris stabilization. And for those of you that have been out to your property or other properties, you know that there was a lot of debris, and some of it was very close to the waterways. And it wouldn't take much to see some of that debris slide right into the Russian River and other waterways. And so with the assistance of CAL FIRE, we talked about that last week, and then also our state partners, Cal OES, and then also our FEMA partners, we were able to stabilize as many piles of debris as we could. And the goal again is to protect the waterways. Over the last couple days, the Army Corps has moved in with their contractor, ECC, and they have begun to actually do debris cleanup. So in a period of 30 days, we're trying to give you as much information as we can. We've tried to stabilize the debris to avert any additional problems, and then now we have the Army Corps in there doing debris cleanup. This is going to take a few months, and we know that it will take a few years to bring Mendocino County back to where it was. And I want you to know that we're here with you throughout those years. And you'll see that, and we'll communicate as much as we can. So at this point, I'll turn it over to and actually, when talking about communication in the meetings, next Wednesday, November 15th, we will be here again. And that will be another community meeting, and the goal of that meeting will be to again, apprise you of what's happened and give you the updates, not only on debris cleanup, but we're also looking at housing. As of today, we had our first housing task force meeting, and again, that's with our partners, our state partners, our federal partners, and really looking at what we can do. And we know, I don't have to tell you the needs for housing in Mendocino County. We had a need before the fire, the need is greater now. So we're trying to put together a plan, a housing plan, and work on assisting with transitional living, and then of course moving into a longer plan for housing. So with that, I think I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tammy Moss-Chandler, who is our recovery director.
Thank you, Carmel. I wanted to share a couple of updates for those of you who were at last week's meeting. There were a few questions about debris cleanup that needed some clarification. So what came out last week and is posted on the state and county website is a document that's on the table in the entryway as well. That gives a very clear demarcation from our Cal OES and FEMA partners, as well as U.S. Army Corps, of what is eligible for debris removal and what is not eligible. We know this doesn't answer every single unique question that you have, but we feel like this is the most clear document and information that we've had, and it's been widely distributed now. We hope it helps clarify some of the gray areas. And then in addition to the county helping you seek your individual questions, that we'll be continuing to follow up on this next week. You can also send specific questions directly to Cal OES through email. And we'll be posting this email, but I wanted to give it to you tonight. It's called debris questions at caloes.ca.gov. So debris questions at caloes.ca.gov. Does anybody need me to repeat that? Yes, one more time. So debris questions at caloes.ca.gov. So they have a team now at the state trying to answer your specific debris questions. I would encourage you to continue to also, we'll continue to advocate for your specific questions. We know there's questions on a case-by-case basis. And we know one of the most difficult things you'll see on, for some of you, on the debris removal program overview is that they made a decision that we heard some about last week, but it's very clear now that for trees, they're not eligible for removal through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers program unless they present a danger to the actual contracted workers who are out there. So we know that this will raise many different questions about what to do with trees. We're working with some partners in Lake County who've experienced this to get more local information for you that we'll have next week. We're working with our partners through the Conservation District and others here to see what other local programs we can bring in to address the variety of questions that we're going to continue to have about trees. And Supervisor Brown wanted to share about this as well. One other key question, and Heather Carell will share some additional insurance information that we discovered over this past week to try to answer your specific questions, is that we really want you to look closely at your insurance tonight, because if there's something that qualifies as debris removal that is not covered by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, your insurance, you should work with your insurance to pay for that, and you will not be billed for your debris removal amount with U.S. Army Corps of Engineers or the right of entry form that you fill out. So we've actually gotten this clarification from the state. Randy was kind enough to send that in writing to us. And I see some questions, so I want to make sure people know there's question cards in the room at every table, and I'm going to have Zoe help make sure people who are sitting in, who aren't at the table also have question cards, and we'll make sure that you fill that out. We're going to have question and answer at the end, so we'll make sure that we address your specific questions as much as possible tonight. Supervisor Brown.
Thank you. I believe they said if the trees were actually within the footprint, Tammy, of the burnt area, that they will pick those up.
I think it's the key definition of the footprints of the burned area. So it's making sure, I'm actually going to see if there's someone here who can clarify this federally. But the issue is that they're not going to pick up the trees now unless they present, unless they're part of the ash, basically, that's within the footprint. So if they're inside, but overall it's going to be only if it's directly in the way of the debris removal crew. So I think in your example, it would be directly in the way and it's going to be picked up as part of that. It would present a danger to them to try to remove that or separate it from the other debris. So Zoe, I know there were people making sure that we have question cards and that people have pens who are sitting in the back as well to ask their questions. And then I wanted to actually just continue to let you know that we will be scheduling meetings even past next week as we talk about housing and address your broader questions next week. We'll be looking to post a schedule so that you can know even further in advance how often we'll have these public forums for you and then how best to get your questions answered in between. With that, I want to turn it over to Heather Correll that those of you who were here last week heard briefly from about tonight, and for her to talk a little bit more about some of the follow-up from last week.
Hi, Heather Correll-Rose. I am the risk analyst for the County of Mendocino, and I manage the county's insurance policies. I just want to let you know I'm in no way a homeowner's insurance expert, and that's why we called in the Department of Insurance, Mr. Tony Signorelli, and our friends and colleagues from various insurance companies and related agencies. Before I turn the mic over to Mr. Signorelli, I did want to clear up some questions that we had regarding the debris removal and your insurance. The county will be contacting, if you completed the ROE form, the county will be contacting each and every one of your adjusters to let them know that you've enrolled in the program. When billing time comes around, we're going to make sure that process is very clear, very transparent, and so that no one is accidentally billed for anything over their insurance, and that the insurance is the only thing that's going to cover that, and everything else is free. For those of you who are going to choose to go with a private party, please, before you do, speak with your adjuster just so you know the ins and outs of going with private debris removal. Some of your policies are going to have debris removal line items or be a percentage of your insurance policy. So make sure that before you go that private option, you discuss that with your insurance adjuster. Just a reminder that the ROE deadline, if this is from Tammy, is November 13th, and the private party debris removal is November 16th. And so I'm going to go ahead and
I just want to say that I feel that for people who are using private insurance, you're giving us this much time with new information to be able to contact everybody we need to call and our insurance adjusters, and the course isn't signing one way or the other, not giving us time. So I'm requesting an extension on that.
So, yeah, I know. So for the rest of the room, I just want to say the concern was just raised in what Heather just mentioned. Those are very close deadlines, right? So the right of entry form, November 13th is what the state has requested of us as a state deadline for the right of entry form. But we will be working with you locally to take right of entry forms even after that. But that is the state's deadline, is Monday the 13th. So the bigger concern is that for private debris cleanup, the guidelines just have come out. So you had some initial guidance last week, but the real detail just came out yesterday of the program. There's forms tonight, and to only give you till the 16th is a very tight deadline. So we will be looking at extending that. We really need to get a feel of how many people are going the private contractor route. And if you're still trying to secure your contractors, what we really need to know is who's not pursuing any route is the biggest issue of why we're trying to make those deadlines as soon as possible. But we will work with you, and we understand that it's a challenging deadline. So Carmel.
I just wanted to comment on the November 13th date. That date for your right of entry forms to be in, that is for this whole region. It's not only Mendocino County, Sonoma. Napa and Lake County. And so we want to honor the state's request. The sooner the right of entry forms get in, then the sooner that the debris cleanup could start. And so I think that that is the desire of the state, and it's certainly ours too, and probably yours. One thing we didn't touch on when we were making opening comments is we know it's raining today. And so we have been working to be certain that we are prepared in case we have any flooding. So I just wanted to assure you that we've had our fires working on recovery with the fires, doing debris removal. We're very much aware that we are at risk for some flooding over the next few months. So we could talk about that more at some of our other community meetings, but I just wanted to be sure that everyone knew that that is an area that we're working on. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmen. So with that, I think we'll turn it over to Tony. A couple of us might leave you up here because we know you have a lot to share, Tony, and we appreciate you being here tonight. So on the agenda, you'll see that Tony is with he's actually Deputy Commissioner of Consumer Services and Market Conduct Research with the California Department of Insurance. So we know we've had a local assistance center, and our disaster resource center here locally has been staffed every day with someone from the Department of Insurance, and we really appreciated that. But Tony's here to go into just a little bit more detail tonight.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. As you know, insurance is a complicated issue. There's a lot of different moving pieces in terms of your coverages. There is going to be a learning curve on your part, and I urge you to get your policy, learn about it. Don't just take other people's word for what your coverages are. Get your entire policy, including your declaration page. Because each contract could be a little different, I'm just going to speak in generalities. But in the end, the first thing you need to know is we're here today. We've been here for a month now, but we're also available tomorrow, next week, next month. Contact us on our hotline, contact us through our website, and through any of the other either community meetings or other events that we'll be at. If you do contact us via our hotline or via our website, identify yourself, as being impacted by the fires, so that we can give you, expedited treatment. I'm just going to go through a few of the kind of the main aspects of coverage, most of which you are already familiar with and becoming familiar with, but it's really to generate you thinking about it and questions that you might have, and we can answer them tonight or one-on-one on an individual basis. The first thing is additional living expenses. Now, additional living expenses can be in a couple different forms. It can be a fair rental value form. It could be if your policy has that coverage. It could be if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, how much would that house rent for? You don't have to show receipts, and you can just get that amount of money for the time that you're out of your house. The other, which is more common, is the actual expenses incurred aspect of that. And what that is, it's not all the expenses you incur, it's the expenses you incur over and above the expenses that you were incurring prior to the fires. So if your daily living was $2,000 a month and now it's $3,000 a month, your additional living expenses is $1,000 a month. And you'll need to show receipts for those differences. For example, if you have a mortgage, that will be consistent. That will stay the same. Some things may go away and other things will be increased. And that's how that would operate. You just need to make sure you save all your receipts, turn them into your insurance company. The uniqueness about when there's a declared disaster is that even though your policy might have a 12-month limit on additional living expenses, after a declared disaster, it has to be at least 24 months. And so keep that in mind. Having said that, it increases it to 24 months if you have lesser in your policy, but it doesn't increase your policy limit. So, for example, if you have $50,000 in additional living expenses, you can extend it out through that 24-month period, but you still have to keep in mind, you still only have that $50,000 or whatever that amount is. And so the difficulty and the challenge, obviously, at the very beginning, it's easy to spend a lot more because there's more of an urgency and there's more of an immediacy to get lodging and that sort of thing. But start thinking about the long term and how to make that last as much as possible. In addition, if you haven't registered for federal assistance, even though you have insurance, you should do so because they are offering programs that if your insurance company, if your either insurance runs out on your additional living expenses or you're short in some fashion, there could be some assistance there with additional living expenses, even if you have insurance. But there is a deadline for that. So if you wait to see if you're going to have enough money, you could be too late to file for that additional assistance. And I don't know that deadline. I think it's in December. Might be the first week in December. We can get that. The other thing is contents personal property. With contents personal property, many of the companies that you're insured with have agreed to the insurance commissioner's expedited claims handling processes, and one of those benefits is an advance up front of 25% of your contents coverage, with the potential necessity to then create an inventory to get more. But at the same time, many of the companies have agreed to a bulk inventory, so you're not, for example, identifying all 100 CDs you just put 100 CDs, 30 pair of pens, and you can bulk claim that information, and that'll help because the inventory process is going to be the most time-consuming to work through. And with contents and with your structural coverage, an additional lot is in effect, because this is a declared disaster, that you have 24 months from the time you receive your first actual cash value payment to recover the full replacement costs on your policy. And so, regardless of what your policy says, it usually will say 180 days, it might say 6 months or 12 months, but it's 24 months after a declared disaster. 24 months not after the inception of the fire, it's 24 months after your first payment for the structure, or your first payment for your contents. With regard to the structure also, if you have replacement costs, which most of you probably do, you have the option of rebuilding or replacing in another location and still receiving your full replacement cost. So you can rebuild on the same lot, you can rebuild on the lot that you purchased, or you can just purchase an already built home and still recover your full replacement cost. Now, work with your insurance company on that. Obviously, if you have a mortgage, you're going to need to work with your lender to arrange to get the first loan paid off and then either get a new loan or work that out with your lender, because they're obviously going to be named on the insurance draft. The structural aspect of this is going to be complicated in the sense that first your insurance company is going to ask you questions and understand what you had. Your replacement cost is to replace exactly what you had. 3-bedroom, 2-bath with the same kind of roof, same kind of kitchen, and same kind of flooring, etc. Once you've done that, once the insurance company's done that, you'll look at that and you'll want to first make sure it's accurate. You're going to want to make sure, do I have 2 bedrooms? Do I have 3 bedrooms? Is the square footage accurate? Is the information there generally accurate? If it's wrong, definitely bring it to your insurance company's attention. Also, once you've received that and you go out to get contractor bids, you may find that the amount on that scope of loss might be different than what your contractor would be willing to do the work for. At that point, work with your insurance company, if you present an estimate to rebuild that is higher than the insurance company's estimate, what they're required to do is pay the higher amount up to the policy limit, or reasonably adjust your contractor's estimate. And so keep that in mind. And you'll need to look at that in terms of where your policy limits are and any extended coverages, building, if you have a building code upgrade, that'll all get added in if you have those coverages. Let's see. Also, basically any of the vendors or outside people you're going to be dealing with should have a license. If you're going to talk to an attorney, they need a license. If you're going to hire a contractor, they need a license. And you should contact the contractor's state license board to verify their license. If you're going to think about down the road maybe hiring a public adjuster, they're required to have a license. A word about public adjusters. Public adjusters are adjusters that are licensed by the Department of Insurance to work for the insured, for the policyholder, to perfect their claim with the insurance company, to help with the contents inventory or the structural, and discuss the contract and how much should be paid. One thing to keep in mind, important, they charge a fee, and it could range 10%, 15%, we've heard 20%. If you have a total loss to your house, and you expect that you're going to get policy limits or close to policy limits for contents, for structural, for additional living expenses, we're not sure what additional value the public adjuster will add to that other than taking 10 or 15 or 20% off of that amount. The way it would work is a public adjuster is prohibited from getting a fee for amounts that you've already been paid. So you're encouraged really to get as much as you can from the insurance company, work things out with the insurance company. And then at the end of the process, if you're really at an impasse, then talk to a public adjuster and make sure that they're clear that they're only going to get a fee based on the value that they add to their service, which is that additional amount that they can get you, because you've already recovered 80% or maybe more of the claim. And so keep that in mind. I know that they're out there, they're probably here tonight, and they do serve a purpose. But at the same time, if you are going to get policy limits, and you're going to get, there's that fee to keep in mind. And in addition, there have been some, we have fraud investigators out, both in uniform and undercover, and there are a number of public adjusters out there that have licenses, and there are a few that we found that are claiming to be public adjusters that don't have licenses. And so just keep that in mind, and you can go on our website and check the license status of a public adjuster. We have if you go to our homepage and you click on wildfire recovery, we have a whole section on our website of different insurance tips for all these different categories that we're talking about, as well as checking the license status of public adjusters. I'll say just one word about underinsurance. We're already hearing that people are concerned about underinsurance. What I would say first is go through the process. It's tough to really affirmatively say that based on people throwing out 300 a square foot or 400 a square foot for rebuilding. Go through the process, get the scope of loss, verify the scope of loss. When you're comfortable with the scope of loss, you can present that to a contractor and see if they're willing to do the work for that price, versus coming in thinking that the insurance company is coming in at $250 a square foot or whatever it might be, and you're hearing from either either word of mouth or even from people at the local assistance center, that it's going to be much higher than that. Just go through the process before you don't predetermine that you're going to be underinsured, in other words. You may ultimately be, and to the degree you feel that you don't have enough coverage and you thought that you should have, we're happy to take that case in, take a look at it, look at that transaction from the inception of the policy through each year, and look at your application and see what you thought you were purchasing and see where you ended up and see whether there's any room in there for the insurance company to resolve that issue. And we'll let you know. And again, through any step of this process, insert yourself into our request for assistance cases. And even if it's initially a couple questions or you have an impasse with something or a delay at the beginning and then you resolve it, we can put the case in suspense and then you can contact us if something else happens in the future, and at least we'll already have your information and things will go a lot faster. So just keep that in mind. And I had some advanced questions too, so I'll just try and run through a couple of those. Most of them surround debris removal. One of them is the insurance company wants to pick up the vehicle, and if it's burned, how does that work? The insurance company can decide if they want to pay you for the full value of that vehicle and then decide to take the vehicle. They'll have to, obviously, because of the consolidated debris removal process, they may have to wait until it is removed by, if it's on the property, by the program, in which case I believe it's going to be staged somewhere where it can be picked up. They may also decide not to pick up the vehicle. And so as long as they're paying you the full value of that, of the vehicle and not deducting what they might claim as a salvage, it would be based on the contract, and there shouldn't be any issues with that. This one says, my insurance will only pay debris removal if they are billed within 180 days from the event. Now, that's not accurate. Well, I don't know if it's inaccurate in the sense of what they may have been told, but it's not accurate with regard to law. As I mentioned earlier, because this is a declared disaster, there's a 24-month period from the time the first actual cash value payment is made to collect replacement cost on the structure, which includes the demolition and debris removal necessary to rebuild the structure. So if you are being told that it's 12 months or 6 months or whatever it is, that may be in your policy, and they might be able to show you that provision in your policy, but the insurance code, the statute, overrides what's in the insurance policy. And the other ones are really more debris removal and not necessarily insurance, so I'll skip those. I think that's it, really. Let me just check.
Hi there, we do have some other questions from the audience. So while the others gather up there, I'll go ahead and read one of them off to start with. So this one has to do with if an insurance carrier is non-admitted, is the 2-year rule, does it still apply?
The answer is going to be no. The 2-year rule applies to the fire policy issued in the standard fire policy, which would be issued by the admitted insurer. But we'll take a look at that. That's an interesting question. Technically, the answer would be no, but I'd say let us look at that, and we can get back to people on that one.
And I'll just add, that's why Tony's going to be here after we have these questions that are group questions. Tony's going to be here. We have insurance brokers here. We have some of our nonprofit partners here to try to answer your customized and individual questions. So we'll break for those after we have these group questions. Thanks, Janelle.
And in addition on that one, we do have contact information. So if you do have questions and you are writing them down, please do put your contact information on there so that we can get back to you if the answer isn't readily available. This one is, can you talk about the mortgage company, how a mortgage company is involved in the process, like helping with payments for the structure?
Well, the mortgage company is basically an additional insured under the policy, and they're what's called a loss payee, and so they're going to be named on the draft, on the insurance payment for the structure, not the contents. And in doing so, you need to work out the process with your lender, and each lender is going to have a little bit different process. Many of them will take the money in, have you sign the check, they'll take the money in, and then they'll disperse the money to the contractor in phases as different parts of the work is done.
Does the 24-month period also apply to renters? Our property is a rental.
It doesn't apply to renters who are renting from a landlord, but it would apply to a landlord policy where they're renting to people.
Are arborists going to go out and test trees along the county road for testing trees to be removed? That may be a question.
So that's a great question. We're resolving the answer for trees that are in public right-of-ways, which is how I would interpret that question. And we'll be working closely with Lake County and the process they used around this very issue. So we'll have more information by next week about that the exact particular aspects of that process.
This is another tree removal. Could you clarify the debris removal benefit on insurance? So if we remove a tree ourselves, because you won't, am I paying for the tree removal? And you get the balance? Not sure if that's clear. That might be a good one to follow up with individually if you didn't kind of too far out.
I would just say that my understanding of the program is it's going to remove what's under the insurance policy. Trees aren't covered as part of the debris removal coverage. There is separate coverage in some policies. It could be $500 per tree, or it might not. It might be a different coverage, or it might not be covered depending on what your policy is. So it would be a different coverage. So it's going to be kind of separate and apart from the debris removal program and the interrelation with the debris removal coverage with insurance.
My house burned down. An adjuster came and said it was a total loss. Now I'm waiting for an appraisal. Why?
Good question. Contact us, let us know if your insurance company's here. I'm sure they can resolve that. I mean, there wasn't initially in many of the areas a delay in access, but that should not be an issue anymore. So the insurance company should be in that process of developing what's called a scope of loss, appraisal of the property, and getting that to you. Timing, we'd have to look and see, when, where they are with that. But if they're here tonight, I would talk to them for sure, and then talk to us if you need to.
My insurance renews on December 15th of 2017. My home is destroyed. Do I pay the renewal?
A law that we put in place after the 2003 wildfires was that we found that many homeowners were being non-renewed, and we didn't think that was fair. So we sponsored a law that required the insurance company to renew you at least that next renewal, so that 1 month, 2 months, 4 months down the road, you just didn't find your policy canceled because you had total loss. At the same time, that statute requires you and your agent and insurance company to have a discussion as to what those insurance needs are, because obviously you don't have a structure to insure, but you may still need liability coverage and other coverages. And those coverages may change over the course of the next year or so. And so the insurance company is required to have a conversation with you. Here's your renewal, here was your premium for this prior to the fire, and let's have a discussion as to what your needs are going forward and what your premium could or should be for this renewal period. After that first renewal, the insurance company is not obligated to renew you, but they still have to follow their underwriting and their renewal guidelines, and they can't just arbitrarily non-renew you.
What do I do if my auto insurance doesn't remove a vehicle that they have paid for and it is in the way?
Contact us. It would really depend on what action the insurance company took. If they paid the full amount of the claim and advised you that they were not going to seek possession of it, and they had that ability in their contract, then that would be the obligation of the vehicle owner to take care of it. If it is part of the debris removal program, it would be removed in that way. Otherwise, the owner would then need to remove it on their own.
The vehicle should have been removed by the
He's stating that it should have been removed.
Yeah, I'd have to, my understanding from, in speaking with Kel OES and others with regard to the debris removal program, is that they weren't, in some areas, allowing the vehicles to be removed from the private properties subject to the consolidated program. But it would really, I have to know more about what area, and it'd really be up to OES as to whether, if there is 100% access, then we would need to look at that.
So for the consolidated program through the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, with Cal OES. So what it says is vehicles are eligible for removal under the consolidated program if on property where a home is destroyed and there is another structure that's eligible for removal. So if it's only the vehicle that was destroyed, they're not going to come on and destroy and remove just the vehicle. But if there's any structure that's 120 square feet or larger, then they would also remove the vehicle. But this is a really important part that we actually are developing in the county to make sure if the vehicle happens to be in the public right-of-way, and we know there's not very many in Mendocino County in this situation, but if it is, then the county is working on how to have that removed, or you have the option to use your insurance to remove that one in the public right-of-way, but the county will be working with you on that.
What do I do about living assistance if my insurance pays no living expense?
And I mentioned this earlier, definitely sign up for the federal assistance program, because they do offer assistance. There's some of it's income-based, some of it's not. Some of it matters whether you have insurance, some of it doesn't. And so there are a number of different programs, both on the short term as well as long term, that you should at least sign up so that they can meet with you and then understand what your needs are and work with you on that.
Add to that, Tony, I just want to add that there is a flyer on individual assistance and how to sign up on the back table in the entryway. And certainly, if you've had any trouble with that, you can, I'll be here after the meeting. You can flag down me or Zoe if you'd raise, and we'll make sure we get you connected with FEMA as well for individual assistance applications.
So the other questions we had were a little specific, which would probably be addressed on a one-on-one basis. And then there are a few that are debris removal in nature and not necessarily insurance. So we'll take those and we will definitely respond to them either individually, or if you left your contact information, we'll send out a response. But I do believe Heather has something. We did before we break for individual sessions. We did want to see if any of our insurance partners or nonprofits in the audience had anything they want to add. Feel free to come up. Anybody wants to come up? Or if not, and if there's no further general questions from the audience, we're going to give everyone the opportunity to meet with their individual insurance providers. Or the Department of Insurance or any of our nonprofits to ask your insurance questions one-on-one. But I think Terry would probably want to.
Thank you, Heather. So we do have quite a few debris removal handouts in follow-up to last week, again at the table in the back. So in addition to this brightly colored chart, we do have the overview again of the consolidated program to have U.S. Army Corps of Engineers clear debris, and the private contracting option and the details of that, and the program details are in the back. And there's also a flyer for the forum that's next week during the day. If you have agricultural or land or commercial concerns tied to agriculture, we'll be doing a forum together with the Farm Bureau and our partners in NRCS and the Rural Conservation District. But before we break and have you meet with our insurance brokers who are here, I want to give Supervisor Brown a chance to say a few words before we break into individual questions. And I want to give Tony a chance to give you just a few last statements about how to maximize your insurance with debris removal options. I know we've answered a lot of questions about that, but I wanted to give him a chance to give an overview of how to make sure you're utilizing that in the best way possible.
There's been a lot of questions on debris removal and how it relates to insurance, so I thought I'd run through a couple of quick scenarios that I ran through in Santa Rosa and in other places that I've been visiting. Similar questions. There would really, in looking at the consolidated debris removal program that we worked on with FEMA and KLOES and various counties since 2007, it works basically the same way since then. And there are two general types of policies out there, insurance policies for homes. There's the insurance policy that pays for debris removal out of your structural coverage, for example, but it also gives you an extra 5%, let's say. If you exhaust those policy limits, you get that additional 5%. And you might get an additional 5% for the other structures portion of your claim, and an additional 5% for the contents of your claim. Under that situation, under those policies, the right of entry form, and by signing that and going through the consolidated debris removal program, the county is only going to collect the additional amount. So the amount that the county is going to collect is capped at the 5% additional amount. It will never use up any of your coverages. It won't use up any of your structural rebuild coverage. It will not use up any of your other structures rebuild, and it will not use up any of your contents coverage if you have that additional amount for debris removal. Now, if you don't have that additional amount, and your debris removal would traditionally, on let's say a single home construction, then it normally would get paid out of coverage for the structure, coverage for the other structure, and coverage for contents. However, the agreement, and as noted in the right of entry form, is that the county will only seek to collect after you've completely rebuilt, replaced your contents, and if there's any money left over in those coverages at the end of that process, that the county can then collect up to that amount, assuming that if the invoice, let's say, is $75,000 from the county, and you have $20,000 left in coverage, for your structure, conceivably $20,000 could be available to the county for payment. So it'll never eat into your coverages until you completely rebuild and need no more money to rebuild. Which, if you're in a situation where you're going to either use up all your limits, you believe you're underinsured, then in those cases, there would be zero amount owed to the county in those cases. So those are the two main types of policies out there. And if on a one-on-one basis, we're happy to talk to you further about your specific coverages and what kind of policy you have and how it might operate with debris removal.
So Tony, I want to ask this one more time in a little bit different way. So is there a scenario where a tree that has fallen, maybe during or after the fire, is fallen, it's burned. Is there a scenario where a tree is considered debris as part of insurance and would be removed under debris removal that you can think of?
Typically not, because the debris is really the debris of what is covered, and then what is covered is the structure. But again, many policies do have removal of trees as a separate coverage, so it could be partially paid depending on how large that tree is.
Thank you. So if you have any other questions, raise your hand because Zoe will walk through and make sure we picked up all the questions. And Heather's going to go through real quickly and introduce who's here in terms of our insurance partners.
Dave Glover, USAA.
Dennis Sullivan, Travelers.
Ryan Pittman, Geico Insurance. Salat Sargisiano, State Farm.
Tom McGowan with Allstate.
Kirk Kellis with Allstate.
Matt Sandberg with Liberty Mutual and Safeco.
Janet Ruiz with the Insurance Information Institute. Nicole Ganley with ECIC and PCI. Lisa Logan with Farmers and Foremost Insurance.
Marcelo Lucy with Farmers and Foremost.
Cecil Autry with Liberty Mutual and Safeco.
And Brad Sherrill with the California Department of Insurance.
Jay Epstein, State Farm. And we've got 5 people from corporate here.
John Lattimore, also from State Farm.
Hi, we have 3 of us here from the CSA Insurance Group, AAA Insurance.
Curtis Montgomery with AAA Insurance.
Kim Joswick with AAA Insurance.
Yeah, Lou Morgan, representing United Policyholders, 501c3 outfit. They will assist you in your insurance endeavors. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that everybody? Thank you. So we hope that you're able to connect with your provider here. They're here tonight, and certainly Tony will be here for a little bit to answer questions. And please let us know how we can continue to answer the questions that you have. And we look forward to seeing many of you next week for the larger town hall meeting. Thank you, Supervisor Brown.